have a bit of a dirty confession to make. I have a really complicated relationship with technology, particularly this little digital appendage of mine. It's a little bit like the relationship that I have with my husband, if I'm totally frank. The relationship that I have is that this device is always with me. I couldn't imagine being without it. It's hard to live with at times, and to be honest, it is always turned on. And so we all acknowledge that technology is an integral part of our lives. There are very few facets of our lives where technology hasn't intercepted. Technology has crept into every single crevice of our lives. And whether we love it or loathe it, the reality is that it is here to stay. And as we embrace new ways of working, particularly remote and hybrid working, I believe that there is a significant threat to making hybrid work, and that is digital burnout. Our reliance on digital technologies, both professionally and personally, will continue, if not accelerate, in the coming years.
I'm just sneaking up to give you a gift because your microphone's not doing what it should.
Lovely, thank you. We can multitask. So, we have to try and figure out how do we operate in this digital landscape. And the reality is we have as human ancient Paleolithic brains. We have brains that are biologically wired to go and hunt, forage and seek information. Who here remembers when we used to go to the library and borrow a book or an encyclopedia? Yes, I'm imagining we're seeing some yeses in the chat. This is what life used to be like. This is what we are biologically designed to do. Who remembers when it was the encyclopedia that you needed that was always missing on the shelf? But today, information is constantly being thrust at us. Alerts, notifications, pings and dings have become the soundtrack of our day. And our human brains are ill-equipped to deal with the constant, incessant digital demands. Tell me, is this what anyone's life looked like at the beginning of the pandemic? I'm hoping we have shifted from when we were digitally dependent like this. Constant digital bombardment. And the reality is that our human brain, our Paleolithic brain, has not evolved to cope with constant digital demands. And we are being bombarded. Does anyone else feel like they are being saturated with information? I colloquially refer to it as infobesity. Research tells us that the average adult is consuming between 34 and up to 60 gigabytes worth of data every single day. This is more than our ancestors consumed in a lifetime. Does anyone else feel like they are the living, breathing example of this? The emoji of the head exploding. And so what is happening is we are operating in this digital landscape. But the harsh reality is, what neuroscience confirms, is that we have a biological blueprint. We cannot outperform the way our brains and bodies are designed. And this is why I believe one of the things that will stop us from propelling into the future is digital burnout. If we don't start to use technology in ways that is congruent with what I refer to as our HOS, our human operating system, then we are going to end up being digitally burnt out. What I want for all of us, whether we are working remotely, whether we're back in the office, is to learn how to use technology in ways that is aligned to our HOS, our human operating system. And if we do, my promise to you is that we can enter what I call the driving zone. No, it's not a golf term. The driving zone is the digitally thriving zone, where we can use technologies in ways that help us to thrive so that we can propel into whatever this new future and these new ways of working will look like. So today I want to talk to you about three things. The first thing is I want to explain what on earth is digital burnout. I think many of us in the room have got some experience, perhaps know somebody who's currently experiencing burnout, but perhaps digital burnout is a new term. I'm then going to talk to you about what are some pragmatic things, what does research and science tell us that we can do so that we can reduce the likelihood of experiencing burnout. And then we're going to talk about pragmatic strategies that we can embed to beat digital burnout if we are in fact experiencing it. So people in the online presentation, be prepared. We are going to have some interactive polls. People in the room, I'm actually going to ask you to pull your phone out in a moment. No, not to check your emails. Please resist the urge of the digital pull, but keep them on the ready. So we know that burnout is rife. Studies at the moment suggest that anywhere between 34.7 and up to 60% of people who are what we call knowledge workers are presenting with clinical symptoms of burnout. That is a staggering number. And so chances are, if you don't have lived experience, you probably know somebody in your network who does. So what is burnout? Well, the World Health Organization now recognises burnout as a workplace syndrome, and it's characterised by three things. It's energy depletion or exhaustion over a prolonged period of time, both physical and psychological. It is becoming more negative and cynical towards our work, often as a byproduct of that extreme exhaustion and depletion. And it is reduced feelings of your competence and your performance. So if that's what generic burnout is, what is digital burnout? Put simply, burnout is simply unresolved stress. Stress that is relenting and persists. What I'm suggesting is that digital burnout is a result of those experiences because of our digital habits. The digital behaviours and skills that we have adopted are leading us down the path or on the brink of digital burnout. And we have conducted, and I'm going to share with you after today, we've got some resources that you can download. We all love figuring out a little self-diagnosis. I have created a digital burnout barometer. And no, the irony isn't lost on me. Yes, you have to do it online. There's not a pen and paper version. But this particular assessment will identify your risk factor for experiencing burnout. And we have had thousands of employees throughout the world complete this, both here in Australia and internationally. And at the moment, in the room, where do you think, not you of course, think about a colleague, your partner, your next door neighbour who you think is burnt out. In the chat, pop it in the comments. Where do you think most people in Australia, if we're restricted just to an Australian audience, where do you think most people are sitting? What's their risk factor? And I'll get Warwick to keep an eye out for the people in the chat. What does anyone in the room think? Hi? Warwick, have we got anyone replying?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes, there's hi, we're getting hi.
Yes, hi.
Hi for sure, hi.
Well, very intelligent people, or it's either a sad reflection of where we are. In fact, the data, and we've had thousands of people complete this assessment, is at the lower end of the high category. And so this is a huge threat. We are going to rely on digital technologies more and more, especially as we embrace hybrid work. So what do we need to be on the lookout for? Research tells us that there's actually 4 stages of burnout. The first stage is what we call the honeymoon stage. This is where we start a new job, we might do a few extra hours, we want to prove ourselves, and we start to develop some unhealthy digital dependencies. This is where we have to catch people. Burnout, as the name suggests, is a slow burn. It does not happen overnight. And so we have to put in place strategies to catch people at this honeymoon stage. The next stage is what we call the onset of stress. What we know is happening physiologically here is that there is a huge increase in adrenaline swirling in the body. This adrenaline makes us tricked into thinking that we are thriving. We start to feel like we are Superwoman or Superman. Our sleep can start to get disrupted. We can have some digestive issues. We can become very irritable. The next stage is what we call chronic stress. And at the chronic stress stage, instead of adrenaline swirling in our body is pumping out cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. It is almost guaranteed that your sleep will be disrupted. You will feel foggy, irritable, unable to concentrate. And it is at the final stage, which is burnout. And burnout is some of the other symptoms and characteristics happening at once, and it is extreme exhaustion. Now, interestingly, at this stage, your body will no longer make cortisol. So if you are burnt out, you will not feel stressed. You will not be going around saying, I'm so stressed, I can't get anything done. When you are at the burnout stage, because your body is physiologically not making cortisol, you won't actually feel that. So I believe what is happening is that anyone else experience techno stress? Yes, that feeling that we can't get the emails to load, we can't get the WebEx connection, our camera turns off. Yes, we are using technology often in ways that is incongruent and is draining our human battery, our brain. And today I want to share with you what you can do so that you can beat this digital burnout risk. I believe we have to reconsider stress. Stress gets a bit of a bad rap, don't you think? Physiologically, psychologically, we do need stress. And as humans, we are physiologically designed to cope with stress. We are designed to cope with short bursts of stress, and we are designed to close the stress cycle. So a tiger used to chase us, I used to run into the cave. Short burst of stress, close the stress cycle. Think for a moment about your day and the incessant digital demands vying for your attention. Slack notifications, email pings, calendar reminders, WhatsApp notifications, social media alerts. The list goes on. And so what is happening is technology is bombarding us and is causing two things. We have a problem. The two things that are happening simultaneously, and I call this the digital superstorm, is that technology has introduced micro stresses into our day. Multitasking, alerts and notifications. Our brain cannot differentiate between a Teams notification and a tiger chasing us. Now, these might sound like benign things, but these little micro stresses accumulate in the day. The other thing that is happening is that our digital habits and behaviours have eroded some of the biological buffers that used to naturally be baked into our days that helped us manage stress. They brought us back to a baseline. Things like sleep, physical movement, even the way we breathe has been changed by technology. Quick little digital diagnosis for you here. Who has suffered from a condition called email apnea? I go into my inbox, I hold my breath, my pupils dilate, my heart rate accelerates, my body has a physiological reaction. We have studied this in the lab. We know this is what is happening. So I think we need to look at these two things closer. How are the micro stresses increasing in our day? And I'm preaching to the converted here. Those of you online, we know virtual meetings are taxing. They are cognitively taxing. There are things we can do to ameliorate that, but we know we have seen a 252% increase in the amount of times we are spending in Zoom, Teams and WebEx rooms. Does that blow anyone else's mind? And that increase is from 2020 alone. So in 2 years, we are spending much more time online. Anyone else feel exhausted after a full day of Zoom, Teams, WebEx, back-to-back meetings? Let me explain why. Inside your brain, two regions, the occipital and the temporal lobe. These two regions process what we see and what we hear. They are very active on video calls. These two regions, These two regions of the brain take up 40% of our brain's architecture. 40% go to these two regions, and so they are very active when we are online. We have done brain scans and we can physiologically show that fatigue sets in at around the 40-minute mark. We also know one of the reasons we find virtual meetings so taxing is because it's the first time we see what we look like in a social context. It would be akin to walking into a boardroom, putting a mirror in front of ourselves and then sitting there. Ridiculous. And we call this impression management. We start to notice our idiosyncrasies. We start to see, yes, we are indeed going bald, as our children have pointed out several times. Yes, I do need to get my hair done. We are wired to look at ourselves. But the most interesting one that I think, and this is substantiated by research from Stanford University, one of the reasons we all experience video fatigue is because we are usually around 60 centimetres away from our monitor. 60 centimetres away from another person is what we typically reserve for what we call intimate distance. This is the space we reserve for cuddling, comforting, wrestling, lovemaking, and all of a sudden you are having a conversation with Bill from accounts. It is stressful, your brain is pumping out cortisol, it is psychologically intense. So, the other thing that is happening, as I said, is we have eroded some of the biological buffers that used to be factored into our day that helped us manage our stress. And remember, unresolved stress leads to digital burnout. We know, for example, the way we sleep has been significantly shaped by technology. We all are aware that the blue light that our digital gadgets emit not only delays the onset of sleep, but new research now tells us that that blue light will stop your body making melatonin. Your pineal gland will not make enough melatonin. When your body doesn't make enough melatonin, it shrinks your deep and your REM sleep stages. Did anyone else notice that during the pandemic you were getting the same amount of sleep, roughly the same number of hours, but you were feeling more exhausted than ever? What we know was happening is we were spending on average 13.28 hours a day on screens at the height of the pandemic. This increased blue light exposure meant that we didn't get into that deep restorative sleep. The other thing that is happening is we're more sedentary than we have ever been. We are biologically wired as humans to be physically active. We are designed to move. When we move, our brain makes dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, endocannabinoids. All of these are just fancy words for things that make you feel good and things that help you manage stress. I mentioned before that we've got email apnea, we breathe differently online. We also know that we engage in something as humans, it's called the physiological sigh. This is a double inhalation through the nose and it's an exhalation through the mouth. We do this naturally, we do it every 5 minutes. Now, I'm not talking about the very melodramatic teenage sigh. We do this without us ever realising. Now, naturally, we should do this around 12 times every hour. But new research tells us that when we are on a screen, our sigh rate drops dramatically. This indicates that we are in an elevated, stressed state. So, what can we do to reduce our likelihood of developing digital burnout? We have to redefine how we look at how we function as humans. We are not machines. We are not biologically designed to be on 24/7. We need opportunities to rest. And in fact, the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, it does the heavy lifting for you. It does your problem solving, analytical thinking. Your prefrontal cortex, we know, only has a 4 to 6 hour battery life. So for those of you who are pumping out 12 and 13 hour days, you are working against your neurobiology. We are not designed for work for long stretches of time. We also know that we actually don't come up with our good ideas when we are thinking. Anyone else online or in the room ever had a great idea in their inbox or an Excel spreadsheet? Anyone? I'm assuming there's no comments in the chat, Warwick. None of us do. Where do we come up with our great ideas? In the shower? Going for a run? Who remembers the good old-fashioned days, firstly, of flying and also flying without Wi-Fi? We enter what we call the mind-wandering mode, the default mode network. This is when you come up to with a creative idea or a solution to a complex problem that you have spent months agonising over, not when you are working. And so we have to redefine, and a critical part of our cultures moving forward, if we do want to propel into the future, is that we have to see rest as a responsibility, not as a reward. We have to do what I call, we need to take peak performance pit stops. Did you know that race cars do not need to take pit stops? I only learned this recently. The reason that they take pit stops to change the tyres, put in new diesel, petrol, fix things up mechanically, the reason that they do this is that they want the car to finish in an optimal state. Those cars are mechanically designed so they could finish without ever taking a pit stop. We need to take peak performance pit stops. And research tells us that if we want to beat burnout, there are 3 types of breaks that we have to take. One of these is far more important and effective than the others. And I wonder online and in the room if you can figure out which one it is. I want to point out that these are what we call the minimum effective dose. If you get more than this, that is brilliant, but at an absolute fundamental level, this is your prescription. You need to take regular breaks, 2 to 5 minute breaks interspersed throughout your day. You need to have predictable, regular time off, at least a couple of hours as an absolute minimum a week. And you also need to have predictable time off every single month. Now, which do you think is the most effective? Micro, meso, or macro breaks? What do you think? They all do work, but one has been scientifically proven to be way more effective than the others. Micro breaks. This is within our reach. I'm not giving you a convoluted system or a complex formula. We have to work with our biology. We are designed to break regularly. We are designed to work in sprints, not marathons. We've got science that now tells us this. Look what happens. These were some results from an EEG scan of when people went at the top. This is when people went from one team's meeting to the next to the next. Sound like a lot of our days? The graph below shows what happens physiologically when they take a 10-minute break. Stress significantly reduces just by having a 10-minute buffer break. So if you've got your hands ready for your phone, and Warwick will put the link in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the things that you do for your micro breaks? You might inspire some other people who are here online or in the room. What are some pragmatic, really simple things that you can do in those 2 to 5 minutes that have a restorative effect for you? And we might get the results coming through. Or the next ones. Okay. So, thank you for answering. Looks like I've given you the quiz for, is your stress well managed? We've got the second one. That's you? Sorry. Can we get the second results? Sorry, the second lot, if that's not too much trouble. And excellent, look at these coming in, fabulous. So we've got a lot of walkers and water drinkers, we look like, in this cohort of people. So thank you. And I want to finish now by talking about what can we do, what are some micro habits? And I often like to present what I call a menu of micro habits. Please do not think this is an exhaustive checklist. I'm not proposing that you do all of this. The idea with the menu of micro habits is that you cherry pick the strategies that will work for you. 3 pragmatic things that you can do to beat digital burnout is we need to start working in sprints, not marathons. We need to take regular micro breaks and we need to manage our digital load. When it comes to working in sprints, the reason that we need to work in sprints is because we have something called our ultradian rhythm. Our ultradian rhythm means we physiologically go through peaks and troughs roughly every 90 minutes. This is nothing new. Our human body has always functioned like this. We are not biologically programmed to sit down and pump out 4 hours worth of work. We are designed to work in a short sprint. Look again what happens when we did brain scans and we gave people a 10-minute buffer break. Again, the research tells us that their stress significantly drops. I want to show you an extra benefit here. Does everyone want to play a quick fun game? This is a memory test. Do not write it down. Do not type it, those of you online. I'm going to give you a list of animals. I want to see what you can remember. I can see some of you rolling your eyes. Donkey, cat, sheep, whale, horse, tiger, lion, hippo, giraffe, kitten. That was cruel because a lot of us have a condition called digital dementia. Has anyone else noticed our memory making capacity has shrunk? You're not imagining it. The reason that I did that, would I be correct in assuming that you could recall maybe the first 1 or 2 and maybe the last 1, perhaps 2? Your hippocampus, that memory centre of your brain, is really efficient. It says, I'm only ever going to remember the beginning and the end. When I share this with educators, I can see their hearts fall on the floor. It's called the primacy and the recency principle. Think of the last movie that you watched. Do you recall the opening scenes in great detail, but the middle's a little bit messy? Look what happens here when you have regular breaks. You have artificially contrived more beginnings and endings. The second thing that we need to do is, as I've hopefully convinced you today, we have to take small little breaks. They are far more effective than those big ones. One I'm going to invite you to do now. Close your eyes. Closing your eyes for just 10 seconds gives your occipital lobe a break. And if you're on a WebEx call or a Teams call and you need to do this, sit very still so it just looks like your camera has frozen. It works effectively. You increase your theta brain state, your alpha brain state, it puts you in an alert state just by closing your eyes. We also know a really simple strategy called the 20-20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes we're on a screen. Take a 20-second break. Look at something 20 feet or roughly 6 meters away to develop that depth of vision and blink 20 times. Who else gets digital eye strain? After a big day in front of the computer, we blink 66% less. We need to blink to lubricate our eyes. And my favourite one, get out in nature. Research tells us, and I love when we've got science that backs up common sense, 40 seconds in nature will reduce your cortisol levels. As busy people, I am sure we can all find 40 seconds in our day to optimise our well-being and beat burnout. And finally, we have to manage our digital load, those little micro stresses that seem, does anyone else feel like there's a cacophony of sounds following you throughout the day, pings, dings and alerts? We know when you are working, if you have your smartphone, even if it is on silent and face down, if it is in your line of sight whilst you are working, research from the University of Austin, Texas tells us it will reduce your cognitive performance by 10%. Put simply, seeing your smartphone makes you 10% dumber. I cannot be any more direct than that. It is literally a cognitive drain. And the other thing we need to do is to make sure we manage our notifications. If you haven't already, disable those non-essential notifications. Do you all know how to bundle or batch your notifications? You can now, on all platforms, iOS and Android devices, laptops and desktop computers, you can now specify what time of the day those barrage of notifications come to you. As a mum who's constantly being nagged by trivial WhatsApp notifications, I now have bundled mine and they come through at 8 o'clock when I am hopefully in a better state of mind to deal with them. So hopefully today I have convinced you that we can beat digital burnout, that we can propel forward if we start to use technology in ways that is congruent with our human operating system. Just to keep you accountable, and please, this is a test to make sure you're not going into your emails and keep your fingers online out of your inboxes and doing these polls, I would love to know what's one micro habit that you're going to commit to after today. What's something that you are going to do to optimise how you can beat digital burnout? If we can get the third, this one's the third poll. Excellent. Can you see here, these are not complex things. These are well within our reach. And because they are backed by neuroscience and psychology, I am here to tell you that it comes with a money back guarantee. These will work because you are working with your brain and your body. After today, if you are interested and you want to do that digital burnout barometer, either to confirm what you probably instinctively know, we have got a link to that assessment that you can do and also access to a white paper that I have written. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope that I have convinced you that we can propel forward and in doing so, beat digital burnout.
So the presentation I'm going to give you now is what I'd call the bare bones. When I'm presenting to a particular group, it absolutely gets tailored for that group. It's the sort of presentation that you can give to a group of small businesses, to a financial institution or to a sector, because the same rules apply. And what I do before a presentation is I do a little bit of a deep dive into that business or that sector. I look at the opportunities, the challenges, who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong. And then depending on the length of the session booked, if it's like a 60-minute session, what I also do then is a creative exercise at the end of it. And that can work for groups of up to 100 people. And people seem to really enjoy it because it lets them put into place some of the things that they've learned in the presentation. So I think when we talk about creativity in business, a lot of people think about businesses as, creative businesses and not creative businesses. And creative businesses like advertising, obviously creative, or design or fashion, but then, finance isn't creative. And that's not true. When it comes to business, creativity is crucial for all of them. And creativity starts with branding. Branding isn't just at the heart of all marketing, it's at the heart of all successful businesses. Even if you have no consumer interface whatsoever, your branding matters hugely. And not in some airy-fairy, feel-good kind of way. Companies with strong organisational brands make more money. In fact, 67.7% of the value of a company can be traced to the brand name value. And every business war is fought using the power of your brand, whether it's the war for a share of a consumer's pocket, whether it's a war for government protections, whether it's a war for consumer protection or consumer sentiment. All political and commercial battles are fought using the power of your brand. And particularly in an era where we need a social license to operate, good branding gives you a buffer in a crisis, as Qantas is finding out right now. Basically, people don't like you. They won't do business with you. It's that simple. So let's talk about what a brand is. It is not a logo or a strapline. A brand is the emotional and psychological relationship you have with every person you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I always think the best encapsulation of it is that a brand is a promise, and a good brand is a promise kept. And this is the most important thing. It is not what you say about yourselves. It is what others feel and think about you. That is what a brand is. So where do you start? I think, we get caught up in running a business, whether you're running your own business or you're working in a department or you're one of many in a business. You get so caught up in the business day to day that you don't think about your branding, but there's the success of both are so linked that you need to stop and think about it. And what you'll find is that everything you need to either strengthen or create your brand is there. It's just a matter of identifying them and then making sure that your processes reflect it. But remember that good branding happens from the inside out. So 70% of rebrands fail. Because what happens is companies change their slogan, they change their stationery, and they go, we've rebranded. You haven't. That's not branding, that's spin, and that's ultimately unsustainable. Don't try and manufacture a place in the world. You're not spec filler. Don't obsess about your competition and where you fit in. And don't start by thinking about what you can do. Start by understanding who you are. And this sounds all philosophical, but why do you exist? Why does what you do matter in a way that anyone should pay you in time or money? And what this means is actually identifying your purpose. What is your social or commercial purpose? And what are your values? And often when it comes to identifying values, people go, well, our value is quality or our value is customer service. Drill down a little bit deeper than that to really pull out a strong brand. If you're saying it's quality, what do you mean by that? If you're saying quality, make your values craftsmanship or attention to detail. If it's customer service, it's maybe it's empathy, it's caring, it's listening. Really drill down in your values, and your brand is actually just the link between your values and your purpose. But your brand is your internal compass of focus, and if you have an understanding of your brand, all the decisions you make are made in alignment with that brand, which actually helps keep that brand strong. So how do you keep your internal brand strong? Don't leave branding to the marketing department. Companies like Google have the CEO responsible for internal branding because they know that setting standards and systems is less effective in influencing employee behaviour than managers who actively exemplify the brand values. And every person in your company from the top down should be able to articulate that brand. So it means you need to communicate your brand internally. Remember that employees are your greatest brand asset. Companies that do best for customer satisfaction are the same companies that do best for employee satisfaction. That's not a coincidence. And it's that brand transference feeling. Basically, if you're not serving a customer, you're serving someone who is. So treat your employees like they're your customers, because they are. They are transacting with you for a career, for finance. I hear a lot of people go, oh, we treat our employees like family. Don't Don't do that. I've seen how some of you treat your family. Treat them better than that. And your employers are the best ad you'll ever have. And for people who do no other marketing, your employees are your only ad. So if you think about it, when you meet someone out and about, maybe at a barbecue, you'll say to them, what do you do for a living? And they'll answer, and then you'll say, where do you work? And the next question is, do you like it there? And thanks to social media, they can not just tell the person at the barbecue, they can tell hundreds and thousands of strangers they've never even met what your company's like. And we've seen now that the emergence of things like Glassdoor, where employee reviews are mattering, and where companies are competing against each other for employees, and that competition's never been stronger. So make sure your employees like you. Which means hiring well. And like that sounds pretty basic, but so many companies get it wrong. Now there's a company in America called Zappos, and it's an e-tailer, and they pride themselves on really good customer service, and they give their customer service reps a lot of leeway to really go out of their way to wow their customers. What Zappos do when they hire people is they put them through an intensive training course, and then after a week in the job, they call them into the office and they make what is called the offer. They offer them $3,000 to quit. Now, only 3% of people take up that offer. It says 3 important things about Zappos. It says their brand value proposition is more valuable to most people than that $3,000. How many of you run a company where you can pretty much be sure that 97% of people will think that? Secondly, they know that if you want your employees to wow their customers, you should start by wowing your employees. And thirdly, it actually makes great financial sense. When you think recruitment, retention, staff turnover is one of the biggest business expenses you have, identifying the misfits really early on for the cost of $3,000 actually makes massive financial sense. So think about your front end and how you can hire people in a more creative way to get better staff. And remember also that workforce diversity is a key driver of internal innovation and creativity, and that's important to keeping your brand strong. The reality is that like hires like, we can't help it. So if the last 10 people hired in your company are pretty similar to the person hiring you, that might be a problem. What Westpac did was they took off on CVs, they took off gender and name. And all of a sudden, a whole lot more women were getting through the interview process. Think about what you can do at the front end. Fire well. You know how sometimes you have someone in your company and you go, oh, they're a bit of a pain, but they do their job well. Well, do you know what? They don't? Because part of their job is to boost the internal brand. And if they're not helping the brand, they're hurting it. The caveat to that is keep the rat bag. And you know the difference, right? The rat bag is the person who speaks up in meetings, who says, I'm not happy about this, I think we should do this. They're the people you want. The other ones, the ones you get rid of, I call them the cancer people. They don't say a word in the meetings and they bitch outside. They're the ones you need to get rid of. Don't be afraid to collect criticism. Often if you're at the top of a business, you're the last to hear of stuff going wrong. And sometimes by the time you hear about it, the internal brand damage is pretty huge. If you put things into place to collect criticism, not only can you avoid a small problem becoming a big one, you can actually change processes in a way that is helpful to your business as well. So putting in place things to collect criticism is a good way to keep your internal brand strong. Now, creativity, as I've said, keeps brands strong. And if you want your clients to see you differently, it means you need to see yourselves differently too, which means doing things differently. So creativity is the heart of every successful organisation and sector. And more creative business processes are good business. So what is a good business process? Before you start, identify the problem you are trying to solve. I think half the time solutions fail because we're actually trying to solve the wrong problem. Take a step back and write a clear brief, including the outcomes you want. It sounds counterintuitive to write a brief when you want creativity, but creativity works best when you've got really clear parameters. And sometimes when you really write down the outcome, that's when you go back and you think, God, yeah, you're right. This is not the problem I'm trying to solve. This is the problem I'm trying to solve, so I'm going about it the wrong way. Involve your people. Sometimes we shelter our staff from the challenges of our business, but sometimes when you involve them in it and get them thinking creatively about solutions, things can change. So companies like Nissan and IBM and Apple all involve their staff in creative processes, in creative business processes, because they know it's the way to move a company from being great to being fantastic. But caveat to this is creativity by committee doesn't work. If you get everyone in a room and they all agree on something, it's probably shit, because good creative solutions make people sometimes a little bit nervous. So I break people into teams of 2 or 3 and mix it up. And remember, internal competition is healthy. Get them to change the scenery. I think, as Dr Kristy said, sitting at the same 4 walls isn't actually good for any creativity. And as Dr Kristy said as well, incubation's essential. If you try to come up with a solution immediately, you will come up with a really logical solution. If you give it time, give it a couple of days, it sits in your brain, that's when you get the lateral stuff that's really important. Be prepared to kill your baby.
Can I get you to kill the hair away from the microphone?
Oh, right. I thought I was running out of time, but it was that. Oh, phew off. Oh, I'm like, ah! All right, sorry, my bad. Be prepared to kill your baby. This is important because sometimes when you come up with a solution to something, you fall in love with it. And you're like, oh, this is amazing. And what happens is you go back to your brief and you try to manipulate the brief to fit your solution. And I promise you're just going to fail that way. It's a really good idea. Put it in your bottom drawer and pull it out a different time. But make sure if your solution doesn't answer the brief, it's not right. So when we're talking about creativity, the rules that apply to external communications are the same that apply to internal communications. So often you'll get companies that do these fantastic marketing campaigns, but their internal comms are really, really boring. So it's actually the same rules that apply, which goes back to treating your employees like their customers. Creativity is at the heart of all good communication, not just the stuff that marketing people do. And it allows you to communicate to people in a way that makes them interested in what you have to say. And you think, oh, well, my employees should be interested in what I have to say. Yeah, probably not. So the rules of engagement are thus. Again, it all comes down to writing a brief. Make it really tight. Who are we talking to? What are we saying? Where are we saying it? What do we want them to do? If you're saying the same thing in the same way to different audiences, you're going to fail because people are motivated by different things. Start with the why. Now, I get this with politicians a lot, but companies do it as well. They get so excited about what they're doing that they don't tell people why they're doing it. And you have to bring people along on the journey if you want to sell them on something. And the why always has to come before the what. And what is the insight or emotion that connects your target audience with the desired response to them? And the reason that is so important is that people make purchases to answer a need. Whether it's a choice to vote for someone, whether it's a choice to follow a change in company process, or whether it's a choice to buy a product from a shelf. All those are purchases and they're all made to answer a need. Write down why people should believe you. Write down just 3 reasons. You will not put them all in the piece of communication, nor should you. When you write them down, again, you start to think in your head, okay, this is the bit of information that's going to be most motivating to this target market. And the reason that's important, and I'll talk about what do I want them to feel about this. Super important. If you know how you want someone to feel about what you're communicating, that dictates the kind of words you use. It dictates the kind of visuals you use. It dictates everything. So really articulating before you even start how you want someone to feel is really important. And then, what do I want them to do about this? That's kind of important too. And remember, it's not about you ever. And I say this to politicians, they're always slightly upset by that, but it's true. So the starting point of any piece of comms is this: no one cares what you're saying. People see 6,000 ads a day on top of all their social media feeds. You're competing against porn and lolcats. So there was a great ad man, David Ogilvy, who once said people don't read ads, they read what interests them. Sometimes that happens to be an ad. That is true for all pieces of communication. So you have to engage them. And that's where creativity and art comes in. I've double clicked. Oh, there we go. Facts aren't persuasive. It's tempting to say, we'll tell people the facts. If facts were persuasive, we wouldn't have been having a climate change debate for the past 10 years. It's only if you can make people feel things that you can actually make them do things. And that's where art comes in. Art and creativity is at the heart of persuasion. Be single-minded. If you throw someone one ball, they will catch it. If you throw them 5, they will catch none. Effective communication works in exactly the same way. And sometimes with clients, you're like, I've got a 30-second ad. I will fill that with 30 seconds of information. You're like, well, you're good, but it won't be very good. And words matter. The words you use determine whether your message is heard through a sympathetic lens. And often if you're in a particular industry, you get used to talking in a particular jargonistic way that might make a lot of sense to you and everyone in your industry, not so much to people outside it. So think about the words you use. But remember that as much as words matter, a picture really does paint 1,000 words. Pictures circumvent critical thought and they become truth in your mind faster. Advertising until the 1960s used to be these beautiful long copy ads until a lot of research showed that the more time people spent thinking about things, the less likely they were to buy them. So which is why ads are primarily visual since then. And this goes back to the why and the what. We want to be positive. We want to show people what our solution is. But sometimes once you show this, the problem, the solution becomes easier to sell. What have we got? Our little man seems to have jammed there. There we go. Come. Okay, loss beats gain. We are more persuaded by what we'll lose than what we'll gain. In fact, our emotional reaction to loss is twice as intense as our joy at gain. So don't be afraid to go there. And as I said, I do political campaigns. You know, Scott Morrison, it's not my job. I did that. Turns out it was his job. They were all his jobs. Who knew? The reason we... People go, I hate negative ads. Why do you do them? Because they work. We are hardwired to notice negative information. When you go on your phone in the morning, and you shouldn't be going on the phone apparently, according to Dr Kristy. When you do and you're on the news site, I guarantee you click on the bad shit first. Everyone does. It's a survival instinct. So we're hardwired to notice negative information. So if you want to stand out, don't be afraid to go there. But and badness is sticky. We weigh negative information more heavily, which is why it's the old management axiom is you give people 1 piece of criticism for 5 pieces of positive feedback. But there's a way to do it. You know, I do negative ads in a way that should never feel sort of doom and gloom and you're all going to die sort of stuff. If you can do a negative ad or a negative piece of comms that doesn't feel negative, that's when you're in a really good space. I call them posniks. So in short, to wrap it up, you need to create a culture where creativity is valued. And to do that, you need to make failure okay. The reality is that creativity requires bravery. And if your team or you are not game to try anything new because of fear of failure, you'll never actually do great stuff. The temptation is, when things go wrong, is just draw a line through it. We shall never talk of this again. But that's not how you learn anything either. So as much as you make failure okay, you need to actually interrogate a little bit, because you do learn more from your failures than your successes. But also interrogate your victories, because that's how innovation starts, and that is also how to keep your brand strong. So I'm going to finish on words from one of the smartest men who ever lived in the last, couple of 100 years, which is Albert Einstein, who said that imagination is more important than knowledge. And he wasn't saying that knowledge isn't important, but it's once you bring creativity into it that truly great things can happen. So thank you for your time. There is a QR code which you can download, which has got my top 10 tips to persuasion. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee.
January 2022. Just a few months ago, I was onboarding a new client, Alex. And Alex is the CEO of a medical technology company, and there he was staring down the Zoom camera at me, head in hands, frustration clear on his face. Kim, just tell me, what do I need to give them to keep them from walking out the door? Alex, like so many leaders today, was twisting himself into knots, trying to figure out how to what to give his staff to keep them from participating in the Great Resignation. Okay, this is what I'm going to unpack for you today, because they're concentrating on the wrong things. The answer is actually surprisingly simple and doesn't have to cost you a thing. But before I get started, there are probably 2 questions in your minds right now. First of all, how many of you are looking at that going, is that Photoshop? Is that really her? And if you're on Zoom today, you're probably trying to scroll in going, that's gotta be her head on somebody else's body, right? But no, integrity is one of my values, and I can say with pride that that was actually written up in the BRW in 2009. So yes, 13 years and probably about 10 kilos ago. But that is me. That was an article that appeared in 2009 when I moved here to Australia from New Zealand, as I'm sure you can tell by my Kiwi accent, right? Not buying it. Okay, so how many of you are sitting there going, I know she's from North America, but what part? And if you're on Zoom, type in the chat box, A for an American, C for Canadian. And here in the audience, do you think I'm an American or Canadian? Thank you. I take that as a compliment. But no, I was born and raised in the United States. But I do take that as a compliment for obvious reasons. But don't worry, I haven't lost the accent, but we won't be doing any high fives or singing Kumbaya. What I want to share with you over the next 20 minutes or so is the 9 keys to avoid the Great Resignation so that your leaders don't have to twist themselves into knots. And a year ago, we were asking ourselves, is the Great Resignation a thing in Australia? Guess what? It's a thing. 9.5% of Australians left their jobs, changed jobs between early 2021 and early 2022. And one consultant at least, one expert at least, is expecting that to go up to 15%. But did anybody read the Employment Hero research that came out this week? 49% of the people that they surveyed here in Australia are thinking about leaving their job in the next year. 49%. So it is a thing. And lest you think that it's a thing that's COVID related, think again. Now, unfortunately, this is a US stat. I have not been able to find an equivalent stat in Australia, but this clearly shows that the Great Resignation has been building since 2009. And that's been my experience as well. That's what I've seen anecdotally. So what's going on? What's happening? I do another keynote that I call the 3 disruptions and the 8-step roadmap to a future fit organization. I start that keynote for senior leaders by unpacking these 3 disruptions. I'm not going to do that today, but I want to really zone in on what I think is the most significant disruption that leaders are going to be facing over the next 10 years, which is what I call the rise of the empowered workforce. How many of you guys have noticed, and type in the chat box yes if this retains to you, how many of you have noticed that your people are getting a little bit more demanding, maybe? Asking for more things? Yep. Well, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. Can I be controversial here? Okay, good. Since the days of the Industrial Revolution, if you think about the balance of power, where has it lied? Between in the organization's hands or the individual's hands? Where has it lied for 150 years? Organization or individual? Organization, right? Well, the rise of the empowered workforce has had this pendulum swing. But I think that we're in danger of swinging too far the other way. I think that we're in danger of creating the entitled workforce that we're complaining about because, like Alex, our question is, what do we need to give them? We don't need to give them anything except our time, because the key to helping avoid the Great Resignation, to keeping your people from walking out the door, is simply the quality of conversations that you have with them. Unfortunately, most managers don't talk to their staff enough. They don't know what to talk about. They don't know how frequent to talk about it. There's a lot of confusion. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to clear your confusion by introducing the KISS principle of employee engagement and retention. So you guys know what the KISS principle is, right? Keep it simple. I like sexy. I like sexy. I like silly. But one of my clients the other day said, you should rebrand that. Talk about rebranding. You should rebrand the KISS principle. It's not the keep it simple, silly principle. It's the Kim Seeling Smith principle. Because one of your superpowers is to bring complex concepts down into very practical and very easy to apply things. And I said, I do like doing that. And this is my KISS principle for avoiding the employee resignation, the Great Resignation. There are 9 currencies of choice here, as you can see. Now, I first developed this 9 currency of choice model when I was a recruitment consultant. Prior to starting my consulting business, Ignite Global, I spent 15 years as a recruiter. 15 years, 5,000 candidates walked into my office and told me why they wanted to leave their managers. People join organizations, they leave managers. They leave managers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview, just go through these, and then I'm going to drill down into 2 of them. One I get to choose, one you get to choose. But this has stood the test of time, and not only does this not cost you any money, this can actually add to your bottom line. Cases in point, First Mortgage Systems just down the road here on George Street, they reduced their employee turnover from 30% to 20% using this model. The IT department within Komatsu, they had the lowest employee engagement scores in the company in 2019. 2020, after this model, highest, and beat the second highest by 23 points. CDK Stone just got an email from the wonderful CEO down in Melbourne, said that thank you for implementing the 9 currencies of choice with us. We now have an ENPS score of 86%. And Tassal Salmon, I'll tell Tassal's story a little bit later, possibly if you choose that one. They were able to negotiate the easiest union negotiation in the 35-year history based on this currencies of choice model. And then finally, OMD, creative agency, digital media purchasing agency, they were able to attain the number 4 spot on the Great Places to Work list, and they credit that for it. So let's get started. What are these 9 currencies of choice? Now take a look at that, and you might think to yourself, there's something missing there. There's something that the press is talking about giving our employees that's not on that currency of choice. So I'm going to give you 15 seconds. Those of you online, type what's missing. Turn to the person next to you, 15 seconds only. What do you see that's missing from this currencies of choice? What do you think is missing? What do you see that you expect to, or what don't you see that you expect to see there? Time's up. What's missing? Oops, went too far. What's missing? What about money? Money's not there, right? And it is not there specifically because it's not all that important, despite what the press says. So I'm going to share, can I share a dirty little secret with you guys? Can I share a dirty little secret with you online? Great, okay. Dirty little secret, something that all recruiters know and very few managers know, is that there are always 2 reasons that people change jobs. There are reasons that push them to look for a new job, and there are reasons that pull them into that new job. Money, perks, benefits, those are what pull people into a new job. But without those push reasons being in place in the first place, they would never look, or rarely look. Without something in the push reason not working for them, they wouldn't entertain that recruiter's call. They wouldn't meet for coffee with that hiring manager. They wouldn't be on Seek at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, which is peak Seek traffic. So most employers concentrate on the pull reasons. We should be concentrating on the push reasons. And those reasons are the 9 currencies of choice. So I'm going to go through them very, very briefly, and then go through one, do a deeper dive, and give you the opportunity to choose the second one. So, and I apologize with the screen if you can't see it very clearly. I will read them to you. So the first one is that people want to work for a company with a compelling purpose. Dee, you talked about purpose and values. Compelling purpose and values that align with their own. People want to work for someone that they trust and respect, who they know cares. People want to feel like they belong. People want to be appreciated, but in the appropriate way. Don't try and speak French to somebody who's speaking German. We need to figure out how they like to be appreciated. People want to have a voice. People want to know how to be successful and how that success is measured. People want to learn, grow, and develop in their career. Not everybody wants to climb the corporate ladder, but everybody wants to develop and grow. People want to have agency, the ability to make their own decisions. control, the ability to control their destiny, and choice. And then the last one, people want to be able to spend most of their day doing work that they love and work that they're good at. Okay, so think about which other one do you want to hear about? Do you want me to drill down into? Because I am going to take a few minutes and drill down into knowing how to be successful and how success is measured. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. Number one, needs of the organization, needs of the individual. We've got to strike the balance for both. And the way to strike the balance for both directly relates to that knowing how to be successful and how success is measured, because especially in the hybrid workforce. Because this is one of the greatest challenges, and I don't know if you saw the Employment Hero study that came out this week, as a matter of fact. 40% of Australian employers have gone, just like the Borg, resistance is futile. 40% of Australian employees are no longer requiring their people to be in the office at all. So how do we measure performance? How do we manage performance? How do we get ourselves out of micromanagement land? Well, unfortunately, it's not only in a hybrid work environment. Globally, according to the Gallup organization, 52% of people do not understand what they need to be successful or how that success is measured. And this is the number one thing that I look at when I diagnose performance problems. Case in point, about 4 years ago, I was running the Mind Reading for Managers program, which is a day-long program that encapsulates this 9 currencies of choice model. And I had a gentleman who was a plumbing contractor from in Tamworth. He owned his own plumbing contractor company. His name was Alan. And I was talking to him about the problem that we have with helping or with setting up the accountability frameworks that we set up, because we use these task-based job descriptions. We don't really articulate what it is that we want from our people. And he says, I don't buy it. He said, I hired an estimator, basically a salesperson. He said, I hired an estimator. He was writing $150,000 worth of business a month in his old job. I only want him to write 120, and he's only doing 80. I went, okay, great, Alan, let's talk a little bit about this. What have your conversations been? He said, well, I hired him from my competitor. I was really happy with that. I gave him his job description. I trained him how to use our systems. He goes, I thought he'd be off and running. I said, so what conversations have you had about your expectations? You certainly have had a conversation that you want him to write $120,000 worth of business, right? And he looked at me and he goes, you would think so. But he hadn't. And in case you think this is an outlier story, it's really not. I could tell you hundreds of them. So my solution here is to throw out those task-based job descriptions and instead create what I call target-rich objectives, or my clients affectionately call them TROs. TROs, 5 or fewer outcomes that are measurable. Everyone has a date, a percentage, a number, or it's a tangible object. And write them in real language, for heaven's sakes. Who wants to win a car? Anybody online want to win a car? Would you like to win a car? Okay, great. There's a car on offer. To anybody who can look at their calendar or their watch and tell me where on that calendar or watch in a timely manner lives. It doesn't, right? It is a meaningless phrase, and yet how often do we put that in our job descriptions? So stop it. Use the TROs. That will help you increase performance. It will give them clarity and certainty around what they need to achieve and how their success is measured, and it will certainly help you in the hybrid work environment, because this works whether or not they're sitting next to you, down the hall, or in another country. Okay, now it's time for you to choose. Which one would you like for us to go through? So go ahead and take out your phone, and I'm going to go to Slido. Had I set this up with Warwick earlier, I'd have Warwick do the auctioneering calling or the race calling. The QR code is there too. Career development and growth, excellent one.
can race call it if you want, Chopper.
Go for it. Go for
All right,
it.
here we go. We're going to have a manager. Having a voice is the main one. We've got a few people sneaking up with feeling valued, then having a manager who cares. Having a voice is still strong. Feeling valued, career development and growth. Oh, it's a tie coming. No, it's with leading in the head, career development and growth. Feeling of belonging, not too strong. We don't need to belong. That's more for Telstra to do. But we still want a manager who trusts and cares. How do we take advantage of the manager who trusts and cares? And respect. That's what it's all about. Our voices dropping. Our voices dropping. We're less valued. Our voices dropping. I think we're having a manager who trusts and respects and cares us is the winner across the line.
Fantastic. Having a manager, thank you. Give it up for Warwick with his great and
the chicken,
jazz hands online type yes, thank you for our wonderful MC, Warwick Mary. Okay, so here we go. So having a manager that you trust, and let me just find the right slide, that would be very helpful. There we go. I am so happy that you guys chose that one. Nope. And let's try and share what we really want to share. There we go. Sorry?
Look how far ahead it is.
There we go. I know.
Usually the winner.
No, it's not. It can be. This is the thing. The 9 currencies of choice can change, and can change within your staff as well. It's amazing. So no, and this is why I had no idea which one was going to be chosen. But I am very glad that you chose this one. Working for someone that you trust and respect, someone who knows, cares. Now I have developed the 9 currencies of choice 10 years ago, and I've updated it once based on the research around the Great Resignation. And this is one of the updates that I made, is that care factor. That is so incredibly important. So how many of you, and if you are following at home, type yes if you've heard of the Edelman Trust Barometer. Edelman Trust Barometer. Few of you, yeah. So Edelman has been studying trust for over 20 years. Now, a couple of interesting things have happened in the last 20 years. First of all, 20 years ago, we used to be a trusting lot, but not so much anymore, right? 6 in 10 of us distrust until we see the evidence that we are worthy to be trusted, that you are worthy to be trusted. The other thing that's happened with Edelman, or that's with us, is that we used to trust in those big institutions. We used to trust in education institutions, government institutions, companies, senior leadership. Over the last especially 5 to 7 years, because I read this every year, it has gone local. We are only willing now to trust people that we know personally for the most part. And that means friends, family, and people's direct manager, our direct manager. So what does that say about the importance of somebody's direct manager? The Gallup organization studies all things human capital and has done for over 60 years. And in 2018, Jim Harter, who is the chief research officer of Gallup, walked into, at that time, CEO Jim Clifton's office, and he says, "Boss, I think that we've now got enough information that we can say without a shadow of a doubt what it is that it is the single biggest factor in your organization's long-term success." Any guesses as to what it is? It's the title of the book. Any guesses? It is The Manager. It's the manager. So they wrote a book about it. The manager, the relationship between manager and direct report is absolutely critical. So if we want our people to stop walking out the door, if we don't want them to participate in the Great Resignation, we have to train our managers, and we have to train them to care about people. McKinsey, 50%, this is a Great Resignation research study, 50% of people leave because they don't feel valued. As you will see, that is the number one currency of choice right now globally, the feeling of not being valued. So, my friends, this brings us to the end of our time together, and I want to leave you with just a couple of things. First of all, I want to leave you with the top 3 of these currencies of choice. I'll give you a QR code to download the white paper where you can read about all 9, but the top 3, I constantly get asked, what are the top 3? And to answer Leanne's question, they change. They change. The first one currently, right now, is to be appreciated in the appropriate way. That feeling of being valued, it comes up over and over and over again in the research. Second one, learning, growing, and developing. Now what's interesting is these two pre-pandemic were very, very important. They were number one and two with employee engagement. And then the third one is to work for a company with a compelling purpose and aligned values. Dee mentioned that. We need to bring our purpose to life, and we need to understand what values are our true values. What do we make decisions by? How do we hire? How do we fire? This is what people, especially post-pandemic, are looking for. So my friends, these are the 9 currencies of choice. I love this quote by Jeff Weiner, who is the CEO of LinkedIn. Might as well start the retention process while they're still there, while they still are engaged and invested in working for you. Don't do exit interviews, do stay interviews. And I've now given you 9 keys to help you avoid the Great Resignation. 9 keys that you can use to do those stay interviews, and 9 keys to propel your business forward. There's the QR code to download the white paper, the 9 currencies of choice. And this is a KISS principle, Kim Seeling Smith principle, keynote around employee engagement. I also speak on the future of work, talent acquisition. I would love to help you help your clients shape events. Thank you very much.